Hey folks, you are tuning in to Common Groundwater, a podcast by the Michigan Environmental Council where we talk about environmental issues that are felt across the state widely and deeply. We go to those places to talk about the stories around them and some of the solutions to them. I'm Beau Brockett, your host, and you are listening to the second episode of our mini-series all about transit across Michigan. And joining me today is Petra Mihelko of Transportation Riders United to talk about some of the more cultural or like on-the-ground sorts of aspects of transit across the state. So thanks for joining us today.
Of course, thank you so much for having me, Beau.
Yeah, so obviously as a staff member of Transportation Riders United, transit is very much part of your life professionally.
Yeah.
Would you maybe mind talking a little bit about that sort of your side of your life, but then also a bit how transit is part of your personal life too?
Yeah, so professionally, I'm the design specialist at Transportation Riders United. I've been here for almost 2 years, and it's interesting. I do a lot of like the more like designing stuff. So I do a lot of our graphics, managing the website, like helping manage like social media and our communications team, and occasionally I do get out in the field and like get out to some rallies, get out to some meetings, like go up to Lansing and talk to some of the legislators. But I do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff compared to a lot of my coworkers like Megan or Joel.
Yes.
Yeah, and then obviously transit's a really big part of that. True is Metro Detroit's transit advocate. We do a lot of education, advocacy, mobilization in the region, and we've also started to do a lot statewide as well, like with state funding up in Lansing. Personally, I didn't have a car for almost 3 years. I'm finishing up at U of M right now, and I didn't have a car for my sophomore, junior, started my senior year, and that meant that I had to take the bus everywhere. I'm originally from downriver, so that has definitely impacted a bit of like, you know, trying to visit family, coming down to Detroit to do stuff, going all throughout like the metro area and Ann Arbor, and taking like Amtrak to visit my friends in Kalamazoo and stuff. So kind of all throughout Michigan. And
cool.
I also used to be a bus driver as well, actually, for a year. I drove buses for the University of Michigan, and that kind of has informed all of my perspective.
Very cool.
Yeah.
This might be just me geeking out over a silly thing, but it does seem super cool that you are a bus driver, especially just so early on in life too.
That's a big thing a lot of people talk about.
Is
like,
it? Okay.
When I started at True, I was like, this is probably the only place where they're gonna be like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, that's so cool. But yeah, the university hires a lot of students to drive, and I just needed a job, and I was like, this pays, they'll train me. And I'm really happy I've gotten to do it because it's nice. It's very helpful for a lot of this advocacy stuff to know like what the drivers actually see and stuff. And
For sure.
I've done some other work with the University of Michigan's transit department, sort of on the side, and I've been able to do that because I used to drive for them.
Oh, okay. Very neat.
Yeah.
Last episode, we had my coworker Ross Gavin on. He's a council member for the city of Berkeley and then does a lot of our transit work with his full-time job. And he was talking about how his first big introduction to transit was around college. And it made me realize how many students, or for how many people that is like their first introduction in some cases, but also how, like I went to Albion College, I went to a small town college. I remember how much of a pain that was when you didn't have a vehicle and you had to go get groceries or like make a big clothing trip or something. It seems like college is like that great first place.
I think it really is for a lot of people, especially like with people who grew up in the suburbs or like grow up in a rural area. Like I know so many people who like they just have never ridden a bus, they don't know how to. And like a big thing is teaching like students how to ride the bus. But it's nice to see people actually get like excited at that opportunity.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Well, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good unintentional segue into maybe the main topic of our discussion. You know, I mentioned at the start we were talking a little bit about some of like the cultural aspects of transit, the actual experiences.
Yeah.
But I think I was particularly interested in, and I think you are interested in as well, like how there seems to be like an especially strong movement or appreciation for transit from like younger generations like yours and mine. And so I'd love to dig in a little bit into that.
Yeah, I think I feel like really starting with millennials, you actually get to like people really liking transit and really wanting it. But you don't really hear amongst like older people, and Gen Z as well has kind of taken that and ran with it.
Totally. And I should ask, I'm like on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z. Are you Gen Z officially?
I'm Gen Z officially.
Okay.
I'm early 20s, so I was like Like, you know, I can't even do the, like, do you remember 9/11?
Yeah.
So I'm very much Gen Z, but I have been told I have millennial traits by those around me.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I'm a bit of a chameleon. For this discussion, I will float to the millennial side. So we have two different perspectives, but I totally get that.
This is an allyship.
Yes, that's right, yeah. No millennial hate or Gen Z hate between us. Well, before we maybe get to the big picture around like young people in transit, would you maybe mind first talking a little bit more about your own experiences, either as a driver or a rider, just being a younger person?
It's really interesting because I feel like I've ridden transit in different capacities. Like I've rode it as a tourist. My actual first introduction to transit was aside from like maybe taking like the tram at Disneyland or the People Mover once growing up, I did a like 3-week exchange trip to Germany through Trenton High School, and because I went to Großziel growing up. We rode the bus all the time. Like we went to Berlin and Munich for a few days, and like rode like the subway, the train. It was really cool to see like everything over there. Yeah. And then here, like I've been a rider in like Metro Detroit, Windsor, Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, taking it in Grand Rapids. My partner lives in Chicago, so I'm very familiar with the CTA2, and it's been a range of experiences, we shall say. I've had the wonderful, like, I'm downtown Detroit and I can just immediately hop on the Q line after getting off like the D2A2 or like the number 4 Woodward. My partner is originally from Holly, and I've done Ann Arbor to Auburn Hills at Great Lakes Crossing. That is a 2.5-hour odyssey. That's just the time on the bus. That doesn't count for waiting for the bus too. It's like 3 hours in total.
Oh, so there's transfers involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've seen like the cut runs and stuff too. So it's kind of interesting. I feel like you can kind of tell when you're talking to somebody who's just ridden it on vacation. They're like, I love transit all the time. And I'm like, I love it too. But have you ever been stranded during winter for like half an hour?
Yeah.
But overall, my experience has been mostly positive. And I really appreciated it during those years where I didn't have a car because it actually let me like live my life. And it wasn't the most convenient thing in the world, but I was able to actually get groceries. I was able to start working like down here in Detroit because of the D2A2 bus. That goes to Ann Arbor. I was able to like visit friends and get to my friend's apartment from the train station in Kalamazoo. And like when I'm visiting my partner in Chicago, like we have the CTA, Petra, Pace, and all of them. So yeah, it's been kind of a gap from like this is something I take for fun, this is something I take because it's more convenient, and this has like been a lifeline for me. But I feel like I've kind of seen it all so far.
Yeah, no, I think that's really valuable. Especially since, like, in all honesty, as we've done this podcast series and done some other work at the Environmental Council, I feel like a bit of a poser of sorts because I'm in that first stage still of transit riding where I'm taking the train, I'm taking more regional buses, Indian Trails, Michigan Flyer, things like that. And sometimes it's for work. Sometimes I need to take them. But I haven't gotten that full experience of like, I need to take this inner metro area bus route to get from one place to another.
There's still a lot of value in that first one too, and especially because like a lot of people, I think a big thing people don't realize is even if you have access to a car, sometimes transit's just much better to have as an option and like be there. And that's now the camp that I fall in, the camp I want to be in for my life, because there's a lot of opportunities as well. My mom lives on Großziel. Transit doesn't go to Großziel, so I would have to get picked up in Trenton or like drive to visit her. But at the same time, like I was able to take the bus to work today instead of driving. I like take it when it's really busy for like games and stuff. Sometimes even like I'm on campus at U of M and I'm like, oh, I really want to run to the grocery store tonight. So usually I drive to do my groceries, but I'm like, I can just take the bus and stop by the grocery store because I need like 2 things.
Yeah, love that. And maybe that gets to like at one of the core values I feel like both of our organizations talk about with transit. Some people depend on transit to get to everything or to get to a lot of their stuff. Other people don't necessarily depend on it in that sense, but it's always nice to have that backup option.
It's something that benefits everyone just by being there, and whether it's because you need it or it's you want it, or even if you don't ride, it's just like we depend on so many people who rely on transit. Like it's a really big like economic engine as well, and it's really important for like climate goals as well. I'm sure it's something you guys work a lot with.
Yeah. You know, another sort of strange part about this podcast, not only are my transit experiences not super deep, but like when we talk about transit, we don't always necessarily bring out the environmental aspects of it. just because it's so holistic in many ways. So like the environmental benefits of cutting down on single occupancy vehicles and things like that are important, but it's just one part of the larger puzzle piece.
Puzzle piece is a really good way to word it.
Yeah.
Because we've worded it a lot like that. Like there's so many components of it, and we've talked quite a bit about the environmental side, especially with like recent statewide campaigns in the past few years. But it's just amazing to see how it impacts like every single facet of someone's life.
Totally. Well, we've talked about our own personal experiences. Do you want to go out a little bit and talk about, I don't know, young people at large in Michigan?
I'd love to.
Okay. Well, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with maybe some of like the more like professional technical sides of things? Or do you want to go into the more cultural side of it?
Let's get the boring stuff out of the way first.
Okay.
So we can spend more time on the fun stuff.
Sounds good. Okay. I feel like I'm a broken record in bringing up the last episode. And I should say to our listeners in the audience, you do not have to listen to these episodes in order. They're not meant to be that way.
But you should watch the other one
Yes.
after this one.
Yes, after this one is key. But in our last episode, Ross, my coworker, talked about how there was like a statewide report about building out Michigan's population, essentially retaining people in Michigan and bringing more people, especially young people, into the state. And transit made the cut. It made like one of the top line items. And this was like a very serious study done. These are the things that young professionals or young people want in the state.
That was a really big thing, like to see, and really amazing just to see the state starting to recognize that as well.
Yeah. Have there been any other sorts of like studies or like proofs of like people loving transit that you like to showcase?
Yes, we, funnily enough, actually, right now I'm doing the proofreading on a bunch of like one-pagers about why transit's essential for various different populations. Like, it's been in the works for a while, but one is about how transit's important for young people in Michigan. Like there's been so many studies from like the University of Michigan, by Cranes Detroit, by the state, by like the RTA here within Metro Detroit. And even just like, even now you have like national news outlets writing stories about how much young people like want transit nationally, but especially in Michigan. Like the big thing with this is that we're seeing these national trends are even more stark in Michigan, is that less young people have driver's licenses than they used to.
Yeah.
Less people can afford cars than they used to. Or even if they can't afford a car, it's hard to have like two if you're like a two-person household. And a lot of people just genuinely want to ride the bus. I think like there's this old study from like 2014 that was feels weird saying 2014 was old now,
You're right.
But we realized I was like that's like over 10 years ago. Wow. But it was like something like 70% of millennials in Metro Detroit said they want more transit, and that's like a big thing. And so many people that have left the state just say a big reason why they left is because they feel like they have to drive here. So it's definitely been noticeable, and there are countless facts and figures and reports to back it up.
Yeah, we just did like a bit of an office clean at the Lansing office of the Environmental Council, and the amount of studies we found around transit as like a proof of being something good for Michigan was astounding. We have pictures of it.
Wow, you'll have to show me.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you at the intermission. But it is really good to see that like it's almost undeniable now to say like that you know to counter that we don't need transit here in Michigan.
Yeah.
So, very cool. Looking more on the cultural side of things, if that's the right phrase, this is where I really kind of came to realize how much people love transit around our age. Like we have entire like Facebook community groups formed around sharing memes. We have like your classic Reddit threads or your Reddit subreddits, things of that nature. Do you feel like those have been like really things that you've also noticed at your organization as well?
It's interesting because True has been in an effort right now of actually engaging more young people. Because we're kind of like a legacy organization. Like we're on year 25 now of existing. So we've been working on kind of building that gap between young people like knowing and caring about transit and actually starting to get involved. But in my personal life as well, it's like every single person I know is like, I like transit. Like it's unpopular to not like transit. I think a big reason why is because of all these like internet phenomenons. For me, it was really like all the YouTube channels during COVID. Things like City Beautiful, City Nerd, who I got to meet City Nerd. True had him last summer. We had him at the Ford Theater in Dearborn, and that was really cool. People like those two, they've been, I think, really influential in actually like showing young people the benefits of transit and actually sort of like putting into words the thoughts we've been having about like, oh, it'd be nice not to have to drive. blah, 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 and like really showing people that you're not alone in thinking that. There are other people in this world.
Yeah. I think to go off that, I feel like one of the common criticisms that I hear, and maybe I probably had a few years back around transit, was like the criticism I had toward it was just because I didn't realize that like the transit we could have is something I actually wanted, right? Like the system that I saw in place in my small towns that I lived in wasn't necessarily fully sufficient. And at no fault of the agencies, it was funding issues, right? Or infrastructure issues that were out of their sort of control. But once I was able to use transit in a way that was truly like convenient and beneficial for me, I was like, oh, I really do like this. I really can have this everywhere. I feel like that is a common theme that I've seen with friends and just with folks in general. Once you get the little taste of like what transit is capable of, you love it.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have any studies or anything to back this up, but I feel like younger people we travel more than like younger people used to, and we go abroad for like a spring break or something, or like a summer trip. You spend a week in some like European city or like some like South American city, and you're like, oh my God, this is so nice.
Yeah.
Like I can just hop on the train at like 2 a.m. and be fine and get home after a night at the club or something. And I think that really has a big part to play too, of just like you said, giving people that little taste, and then they can see what we could have. And it's kind of funny you bring up like the what we have as well currently, because a lot of the stuff we do is getting people to acknowledge as well that like, well, what we have isn't perfect. I mean, no transit system is, but some are definitely better than others. But still seeing like the merit in what we have and kind of incorporating it into your lifestyle, and actually like being able to use it when it's available with like DDOT, SMART, and all the 77 agencies throughout Michigan.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'd love to like maybe pivot after an intermission to something more action-oriented, so to speak. Before we do, though, are there any other sorts of like scientific, cultural, experiential touch points you want to make sure we touch on?
Let's see. I think a big cultural thing too can be taking it with friends as well. I've noticed as a student in Ann Arbor, just like running into people on the bus or walking on the street, it's not something you really get when you drive. And that's been like a really fun, serendipitous like thing that occurs in my life. Even just like, getting to ride the bus line home with friends because you guys didn't drive there separately. I think that's another cultural aspect that plays into it, like the social dynamic of it.
Definitely so.
Yeah, that's my final thought there.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, in that case, I think we're at a perfect point to have a quick intermission. So to folks listening, stay tuned and you'll hear from Petra and I soon. Hey folks, you are tuning in to Common Groundwater, a podcast by the Michigan Environmental Council. Petra and I are talking about transit, specifically the youth in transit, us in transit. We left off at the break talking a lot about like the ways in which younger folks interact with transit as users, as people who appreciate it, and then we talked about some of our own experiences. Question for you about like the why behind it all. Like, what are the things that people in general, but especially like your millennials, your Gen Zers, what do they especially care about when it comes to transit? What gets them so excited about it?
I really think a big thing is just financial anxiety and affordability. Like millennials lived through the recession, Gen Z is looking down the gun of something similar. And like, we also lived through the COVID pandemic too, and we all have like really strong memories of this and just how hard it can be to make ends meet. It's no secret that like costs of things are rising, whether it's housing, whether it's a car, whether it's groceries, and wages are not keeping up. So I honestly think that is such a big reasoning for it. I think another as well is like we all just want to live more sustainably. Like we're all very conscious about climate change because so much of our emissions come from the transportation sector, and because of our like reliance on single occupancy vehicles and whatnot. A lot of people see transit as a way to actually decouple ourselves through like organic change in our lifestyle from all this. And I think a big part as well, there's a lot that goes into it, as you know, but just like imagining like a better world, a better tomorrow where it would just be really nice. Like you don't have to spend time driving or in traffic. You don't have to spend time worrying about like driving home from the bar, or like what are you gonna do if like it's too far of a drive for someone, like getting dozy behind the wheel or something. Yeah, just so much that goes into it, but
Yeah.
a lot of it's our anxiety.
Yeah, right. Yeah, climate anxieties, financial anxieties. Well, and as we talked about earlier, you said Transportation Riders United really likes to use the like the symbol of like a puzzle
Yep.
for transit, and that seems like just it, right? Well, speaking of Transportation Riders United, your organization, my organization, folks across the state are making what feels to be, at least in my 5 years at the Environmental Council, to be like an especially big push to increase transit funding, to add to transit infrastructure. Would you mind talking a little bit about like what your organization is doing right now and maybe working toward in the future?
So we, let's see, we're coming off of a pretty productive session in the legislature recently. When I started at True, we started focusing on a lot of statewide campaigns and like policy changes, really focusing for funding. Technical term is local bus operating funds, but basically the money the state gives to all the agencies to actually run their buses instead of doing like big capital expansion projects. Now we're still doing a lot with state investment, especially with like the recent road funding stuff. Locally, we're doing a campaign. We're working with a bunch of allies and partners in Detroit to try to double the size of DDOT as an agency. And really, they're doing a lot of great work at the agency as well, but we're really trying to push council to give them the funding they need to make these things happen. We're working on a lot of regional transit expansion, trying to get like transit to every single community in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County. And a lot of just messaging around transit too, like really trying to show people that like transit is cool, transit can be sexy, like, and getting people to like ride the bus as well and make sure they know that buses exist in their community. I'd say that's kind of a lot of the things that we're working on right now.
I like that. So we have the statewide approach of working on largely funding, changing the funding mechanisms or increasing funding. You have the more local, where you're working on expanding. And then you have like the emotional, personal sort of aspect where you're encouraging people, like making people feel less worried and more excited about transit.
Yeah, it's a lot of the education stuff as well that goes into that too.
Yeah, and I have to say that my organization is very state-oriented. We work on statewide issues. And so our organizations have been working together to not only make sure that we get good funding in this sort of like budget cycle in Michigan, where there's billion-dollar road talks or road funding talks going on right now, but not a whole lot for transit. But we're also kind of wanting to change the structure too, so that in the future, when we do fund more, we make sure that transportation is holistically funded, equitably funded. That was a very long-winded way of saying, even though my organization is very statewide, I feel like something that we've been talking about internally and externally time and again is just how successful like transit millages have been recently, and I feel like Transportation Riders United has been like an awesome like leader on that front to like make it happen. So yeah,
we've been very proud of our recent wins, like how Smart renewed their millage in 2022 in Macomb. Oakland voted to end opt-out, so every single community now pays for Smart. That was a really big thing and failed in 2016, succeeded now. And the state legislature, due to the hard works of a lot of our advocates and a lot of people from the ground calling their legislators, they were able to like abolish the system that there still needs to be a public vote to actually change it. But now like Wayne County is on the path to have all of its communities opt in. So now every single community should be able to get that service because they're paying for that service.
That's awesome.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah, I mean, between those three counties, Macomb, Oakland, Wayne, that's a large portion of Michigan's population lives right here.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff ends up helping out like the other communities as well, because like then the state legislators are seeing, transit really matters to people, and they matter throughout the state as well, which gets into a lot of the stuff you guys do too with us.
Yes, very true. Since we talked so much about young people in transit, or people in general in transit, I'd love to like maybe talk a little bit too about the ways in which individuals can like help make a difference in the world. I know Transportation Riders United, obviously you just said earlier that you do a lot of like educational work, so you're interacting with people a lot. What are some of the ways that you encourage individuals to like make a difference in this front?
There's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. I think the big thing is just like learn who your organizations are, learn who your advocates are in your area. Like just look up like if there is a riders union, sort of like ours, whether it's like through like one of the political parties in the area, just like getting involved, joining their mailing list. If you have the means, donate, even if it's a really small amount. I've learned that those small amounts can make a big difference when they add up. And taking a few minutes out of your day to actually email, call your leaders, whether it's your council members, whether it's like at the agencies, or it's like a state legislator, the more you really show up and you say something, it really goes a long way. Like these people, you're their constituents and they're listening to you. And even if you don't think they'll really listen to you, or even if they seem really aligned with transit already, or like anything else you care about, just take a few minutes to call them, say a story if you have it, even if not, say it's important to you. If you're sending an email, like you can base off of a template, but just edit a few words of stuff, add like your own anecdote at the end. That is advice from actually Senator Mallory McMorrow. We've done a lot of work with her, and she's been like a personal, really big inspiration to me when I see her speak. She's always kind of emphasized this importance of just make sure you are actually telling your leaders that this matters, because they can't read your mind.
Yeah, right, yeah. I don't know if you feel this way too, but before joining an environmental organization, I didn't think that emails mattered that much.
Yep.
But holy smokes, they really do. And especially the more local you get, the more impactful they are.
It's crazy how much just one conversation can change things, and like what's 5 seconds for you ends up like going a really long way.
Yeah.
And I was really scared to get involved as well, because like calling my legislator seems scary. Like I'm like, I don't know this person. But like you have to start somewhere, and getting over that first hurdle really does a lot.
If I could add on a personal thing that I want to work on as a transit fan, something we talked about earlier, and that is for me to take the bus more. Like, I live in Lansing. We have, as far as Michigan goes, I feel like we have a pretty good system in place, especially with its interconnection between MSU. And so I think I'm going to make, I think, doing the things that you are passionate about makes you more passionate about them. And if I'm passionate about transit, take the bus a little bit more and really get a better experience. So I think I'm going to personally do that as a way to help myself, contribute to the cause of it.
I think that's a wonderful goal. And I try to do it too as well. Like, even though like now I have access to a car, I still try to like take the bus when I can, and especially like kind of think about it if there's a trip where I don't have the opportunity to, because even the lack of doing something can also be a story as well. Be like, I'd really like to take the bus here, but I can't.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Are there any sorts of points or stories that you wanted to make sure we mentioned about anything we talked about or anything otherwise?
Let's see. I would like to take a second just to echo. It's really important to like get involved and speak your mind on these matters, especially like given everything that's going on. You hear from a lot of food advocates, the future is local, and I think that really goes for a lot of like issues like transit or like with climate, really letting your local leaders know that this is something that matters to you, and like connecting with other young people around you. Be like, hi, do you know how to get involved with this person? Like we have this really big community of people that care about transit, and we can all care about it and fight for it together. We just need to talk to each other and really like put that foot out there.
That's true, yeah. Like we have the clubs in place, we have the groups, the Facebook communities, the Reddit communities.
So no doom scrolling, no apathy.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's those are wonderful words to leave off on.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say?
Oh, never had this thrown back at me. No, I feel like I was able to share everything I wanted. You did a great job of covering so many viewpoints and perspectives. So you're welcome. Yeah. Well, with that then, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast
Of course,
today.
Thank you for having me. It's a big honor.
Yeah, not a problem. And thank you to our audience as well for tuning into this episode and to other episodes in the past. If this is your first time tuning in, know that there are links in the description below where you can access information about either of our organizations, get more information on transit nearby to you, and opportunities to help make a difference. As we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of movement going on at the state and local levels to make sure that transit is fully funded and that its infrastructure meets the needs of the people it's meant to serve. So with that, thanks again, and
thank you so much.
Stay tuned.
Have a good day.